Brendan Burns.
Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to follow the convener of the National Blue Caucus and how apt it is that I should follow on. Blue-green, I understand, is the most toxic algae found in New Zealand's waterways. It's killing dogs, and the rivers of several rivers in Canterbury are killing the dogs that have managed to eat some of that blue-green algae, and how appropriate and apt it is to follow on from that Speaker. This bill will be supported to the Select Committee by the Labor Party. We believe there could be some real value in a properly funded and constituted Environmental Protection Authority, but the question is whether this will be providing the powers and teeth that are necessary to protect our environment. I do believe that's what the Honourable Dr Nick Smith did want. I do believe that because he has spoken strongly about protecting the environment. Prior to the election, he and the Blue-Green Caucus had a very strong paper, the Blue-Green Vision for New Zealand, which promoted the Ministry for the Environment being replaced by an Environmental Protection Agency. Of course, we see that heralded tonight, and also by a Ministry for Sustainable Development. And I do not see the second leg of that policy emerging. Maybe that's still in the offing, but I have my doubts. I have very real doubts that we'll see that. That didn't make it to policy, the Blue-Green Vision for New Zealand by Honourable Dr Smith. So there we go. It didn't come through. And why didn't it come through? Because I think from prior to the election, and certainly from the election onwards, I think Nick Smith lost ground. And I think the first signal of that came on December the 20th, 2008. A forum was called by the Federated Farmers for irrigators across Canterbury. It was attended by Jerry Brownlee as Minister for Economic Development, by Bill English as Minister for the Finance, and by David Carter as Minister for Agriculture, but Nick Smith wasn't there. And I think that's because they didn't want any environmental voice present at that meeting, because that set the scene for the demolition of ECAM, which followed in rapid fashion from there on. And with that bill itself, I think the Environment Canterbury Bill went further than Dr Smith would have wanted. I really would say that. I think that he wouldn't have wanted, for instance, the inclusion at the 11th hour of the move to do away with the process for awarding and retaining water conservation orders, because that amendment to that bill as included and presented and passed by this House in 30 hours of urgency, which we're going to see mirrored by this legislation, I note tonight, nearly cost him the support of many in the Land and Water Forum, and indeed I think his own good friend and confident Guy Salmon was horrified and said so publicly at that late addition to the bill, because the environmental movement, trying to give some support to the good ambitions of Dr Nick Smith, I think felt betrayed by the Environment Canterbury Bill and Act as it was passed through. And then of course we come even to today, where for the second time I asked Dr Smith in the House about the Prime Minister's statement in February that he wants to see new water schemes in place in Canterbury in next year. And the question that flows from that is, how on earth can he, as Minister for the Environment, get in place new environmental controls in that very rapid time frame? And the truth of it is, he can't. He cannot do that. There is no way on God's earth that he can follow through with the good recommendations from the Land and Water Forum, which managed to hold together despite the tests that the Environment Canterbury legislation put to them. But they cannot, they know that there can be no way that Dr Smith can start implementing the recommendations that they have put up, because they are complex. They require legislation, they require implementation, and they're not going to happen in rapid fashion. And here we have the Environment Protection Agency Authority as promulgated by this bill. That's not going to come into force until July next year. And yet here we have the Prime Minister saying he wants to see in Canterbury and possibly Otago new water schemes in place. And there is no way that we will see any environmental change through that time frame. The other aspect of this that is interesting is the Minister wanted the EPA to start a year earlier, because he told the New Zealand Planning Institute on May the 8th last year in a speech on his Beehive website that he wanted, quote, the expanded EPA fully operational by the 1st of July 2010. 1st of July 2010. So no wonder we're now seeing urgency attached, because here we are, 12, 15, 18 nearly months later after he wanted the EPA operational. And I think the reasons for that are very, very clear. I think what's happened is within the Cabinet process a very clear message has been sent to Dr. Smith. Don't think you're going to get new money for any agency, especially to deal with protecting the environment, because the Prime Minister's got an agenda for rapid growth in Canterbury and other places, and we don't want anything getting in the way of that through the Environmental Protection Authority or anything else. And of course, even when the EPA comes into effect on the 1st of July next year, so too late to stop any of the things that are going to happen with those new water schemes coming into place, how many people are going to be employed by the EPA? How big an agency is it going to be to deal with all of the critical environmental issues that this nation faces, and which I think this minister acknowledges? Certainly in opposition time and time again, he took the call and talked about the damage to freshwater quality, to the whole range of environmental damage that was being perpetrated. And what are we going to see? Well, the budget for the Environmental Protection Agency is going to be of the order of $26 million. And that's going to involve 140 staff. So if you thought, well, that's a pretty good number of staff if you want to see some serious change to the way we protect our most precious resource, the very driver of our economic base as a nation, comes out of our freshwater sources. We make our reputation in the world on the basis of being clean and green. Water is fundamental to that, and until we get water right, and I believe the Minister wants to get it right, we will not protect our market edge in the world economy. So we must improve water quality. So if we've got 140 staff, that'd be a great start. If we had 140 staff dedicated to improving that. There's a problem though, because of the 140 staff that the Environmental Protection Authority is going to employ, 90 of them are coming across from the Environmental Risk Management Authority. So 90 out of 140 come from IRMA. That's good. They do a great job too, an important environmental protection job. But they're not new staff. They're transferred staff in this brand new agency this minister's establishing under this bill. What else is that agency going to do, the EPA? Well, it's going to take on the issues of climate change. It's going to look after the issues of climate change. So how many staff are going to be involved in dealing with that? Maybe 20 staff? So now we're up to 110 of the 140 staff of EPA are not going to be dealing with the critical issue of freshwater quality. Who else is going to be employed by EPA? Well, we're going to see staff employed working from the MED currently on imports and exports of living modified organisms. So a handful of staff there, maybe not a large number. But the Antarctica division currently within the Ministry for the Environment is moving across. So they're going to be part of the new EPA as well. And then we're also going to have staff involved in protecting our exclusive economic zone. So all in all, I'd suggest, and I forgot, there's one other element within the EPA, and that's the Fast Track Agency. That's the agency that pushes through the projects like Waterview when the government wants to fast track them. So I want the Minister to say at some point, what are the numbers of staff that are going to deal with the flagship issue of freshwater quality? Where are they? What are they going to do? How many of them are going to be there? Because by my count, there might be none coming across to deal with the critical issues of freshwater quality. And that is going to be to the detriment of New Zealand, and it's going to be against a Prime Minister who's still pushing for rapid growth in Canterbury, still wants to see rapid runs on the board in terms of growth, and we have got a minister with a much vaunted flagship agency which actually isn't going to have any staff to do the job we'd all like to see it do in terms of protecting our most precious resource of all, fresh water. There's nobody there to do the job unless Bill English digs into his pockets and finds some new funding. And I'd suggest, given the track record of this minister, that's very, very unlikely because, as my colleague Charles Chauvel noted, the track record beyond the rhetoric of this government, it talks the talk of environmental protection, it establishes the Agency for Environmental Protection under this bill, but there is not going to be the staff and resources to deliver the goods that the government says it wants to deliver and which New Zealanders want to see delivered. There is not the staffing there under this bill, under this agency, and that's a tragedy.